Okay, recording. Okay, so let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome back, or welcome if you haven't been here before. Let's start off with some meditation and positive motivation. So if you go ahead and set up your posture, making sure your back is straight and your body is relaxed. One of the best things we can do for our bodies, for our health, both our mental and our physical health, is actually to learn how to relax. And in some ways, it's difficult because it is an act of surrender, to trust and let go that things are going to take care of themselves for a little while. And we don't need to be so alert, so attentive to the external situation. And you can take some deep breaths, which also helps cue your body physically to relax. And with each exhale, settling more deeply into your body. And then bringing to mind a positive intention for engaging in this class today. That we're all here, we've all come together in order to benefit ourselves, to increase our well-being, to learn how to calm our minds so we can respond to the difficulties in our situation more effectively, with more wisdom, with more kindness. That we can really use this opportunity to study, to learn, to practice, so that we can be of greatest benefit to others. We can show others how to respond with wisdom, with kindness, with gentleness, even when there's lots of fear and lots of stress. And making our intention as wide as possible, thinking about all the beings on this planet who are suffering, who are having difficulties now in this moment, that by our small act of engaging in this class, that they somehow may have their suffering relieved. And now I'd like you to return to your body and become aware of anywhere you might still be holding some tightness or some tension, and let go of that. So with each breath, breathing it out, allowing your shoulders to relax, drop, let go, allowing your back and your abdomen to be soft, and allowing your breathing to be easy. And when you're ready, you can bring your awareness to your breathing. Allowing your mind to let go of any thoughts, feelings, fears, and just become absorbed in the physical sensations of your breath. Noticing your lungs expand, noticing when they contract, and staying present through the gaps between each breath. And if you find that your mind is carrying you away from the breath, breathing, you can label it. So just saying to yourself, giving your mind something to do. Now I am breathing out. Now I am breathing in. Now I am breathing out. Now I am breathing in. As you do each action. And if you get carried away again by your mind, just very gently bring it back. Noticing the rhythm of the breathing. Sometimes we have really short breaths. Sometimes we have long ones. Sometimes our breathing is fast. Sometimes it's slow. And whatever is happening, just observe it. Just watch it. You don't need to do anything about it. It'll take care of itself. And then when you're ready, see if you can become aware of the observing aspect of the mind. The still, clear, knowing nature of the mind. that consciousness, that awareness that is always present whenever you are focusing on anything. You could think of it as the space of the mind that allows consciousness, that allows things to be in the mind. So that observer. And see if you can become present with that awareness. Shifting from the content to the subject, the observing mind. Always open, always clear, always present, and yet very peaceful, very still, simply receiving. And then you can return to the breath and slowly start bringing yourself out of the meditation. Okay, so just to review a little bit what we did yesterday. We talked a bit about meditation, the different types of meditation that we can do when we're engaging in this path. And in particular, calm abiding is really helpful and really effective and really useful for dealing with difficult emotions, dealing with, our times of uncertainty and change that we're living in right now. And this, sometimes we can be very we can start to get stressed because we are closed in, because we don't have our usual ways of distracting ourselves, of going out and going to the movies and seeing our family and going to work and all these things that usually occupy our minds. And now, being in, in our homes, we have this incredible opportunity to learn how to work with our minds, but at the same time it's difficult. We're being forced into it, maybe not, obviously not under our control. And so using shamatha, even very short, sessions of shamatha can help us, bring us back into contact with our own calmness, our own inner wisdom, our own ability to deal with these changing and difficult circumstances. And so, particularly because of relaxation, but also because this relaxation and this calming of the mind allows us to deal more effectively with this, constant, ruminating that the mind can get into, whether it's bringing up memories of the past or fears about the future, that allowing to be ourselves, to just go inward and to relax and be present and focus, actually allows us to sift through those thoughts much more easily and much more effectively and much more with relaxation. Okay. And not reacting, not, getting into negative habits that we can possibly get into. And then using analytic meditation. So analytic meditation uses our thinking ability, it uses our discrimination, it uses our analysis, but we combine these two, we put these two together. So we do this analysis and this ability of our mind to be logical, to test our assumptions, to see if what some of the fears that we're coming up with, some of the anxieties that we're generating are actually accurate, because our minds are very good at generating lots and lots of difficult things, difficult emotions. Just so you know, what you're hearing is actually the pouring rain here in Dharamsala. So don't think that it's, static in your computer or something. It's actually the rain. So anyway, analytic meditation allows us to come to conclusions about situations and about what is happening, in reality, based on more clear thinking, more logic, more inner wisdom. Okay. And we, it's our minds are an incredible tool. And like I said yesterday, sometimes we don't think of meditation as a time to actually use our wisdom, but it is. It's actually more effective to go into a meditative state and then use our problem solving capabilities and our ability to see lots of different points of view, because when we're calm and relaxed, we're less likely to become reactive and to ruminate and see only one point of view. When we have this more open state of mind, we can start to see lots of possible options, lots of ways to solve problems, and we can see many different perspectives, on whatever our problems are that we're dealing with. We can also get in touch with some concepts like we're going to talk about today, of the fact that that things are always changing, that actually this situation for us, even though it feels, in its because of the nature of it, because of it being so global, that it can feel like something that we haven't dealt with before. But in fact, we have dealt with change in our lives. Every one of us has had to deal with big changes in our lives that were not necessarily under our control. If our family situations changed when we were younger, if our parents went through divorce, or we lost a parent, if we lost a sibling, we've dealt with, changes in our jobs. If our job situation changed, if we got a new boss, if we lost a job, in our school situations, if we moved homes, if friends moved away, we've all dealt with very challenging situations in our lives in the past, and we've come through. We're much stronger than we realize. And so applying, those situations and those tactics, those ways we've dealt with change in our lives in the past with wisdom to our situation now, we can start to relieve some of that difficulty, some of that fear, some of that stress that we may be feeling. Just to remember that, I've been through hard times in my life in the past, and I've come through. I've dealt with it, and I've dealt with it well. And so that through starting to open our minds up a little bit to other situations in which we've dealt with difficulties can be very important. And we can do that when we start thinking calmly and with our analytic, with our logical minds, with our discriminating minds. And then we also talked about mindfulness. So we did a little bit of that today in our meditation. We did some open awareness where we are starting to get in touch with this aspect of our mind that is always present, that is that it needs to be present in order for our minds even to be function, you know, even to be aware of anything. We have to have this aspect of the mind that is open, that is clear, that is aware, in order for us to even, you know, see or think or know, or, you know, even read the news, or even talk to our friends, or even have relationships. And so that awareness is always present in our minds, and that awareness is a calm and a still place. It's a place of that we can tap into at any time, to know that we are that we have what is it, well, we have intelligence, we have, you know, that our conscious mind is present. And when we tap into that, we tend to create this space between, you know, the ruminating and the fears and the, you know, the depression and the, you know, the beliefs about ourselves that somehow we're not okay, and, you know, like all these things that our minds can come up with that aren't necessarily true, that we can tap into this open awareness and open possibility and flexibility that is always present in our minds. And mindfulness then allows us to have our awareness of that, and also be aware of what is going on with our minds. What are we generating? What are the fears or the self-talk that we're doing that can be contributing to our suffering in different ways? Because oftentimes we have recordings in our minds, habitual ways of thinking that are there because our minds move so fast. You know, sometimes I've heard, you know, that we talk to ourselves at like 800 words per minute, right? Which, if you've ever tried typing, you know, typing, some really good typists get up to like 100 words per minute or something. But, you know, talking to ourselves that much, we cannot possibly be aware of everything that we're saying to ourselves, and yet it is influencing us. It's influencing us on a physical level as well as a mental level. So if we can start to slow that down a little and become aware of some of the tapes, some of the ways we're talking to ourselves, well, then we can work with those. We can say, you know, is that really true? Is my message to myself that I'm somehow stupid or an idiot, or can never succeed, or can't deal with this, and this is such a horrible situation? If some of those thoughts can start to become more aware to us, if we can be more aware of those, then we can start to accept them, acknowledge them. I'm not saying push them away. What I'm saying is then see if they're actually true. You know, is it actually true? And start to generate and bring in and emphasize some of those positive aspects of our situation, of ourselves. Start to see that that isn't, you know, the whole truth. Those messages that we have are not necessarily the whole truth, and we they aren't necessarily who we are. We're a whole bunch of things, right? We're, you know, we're all our relationships, we're all our experiences, we're all of our you know, all the work we've ever done, all the, you know, the learning we've done. You know, we're so many things that to just start to, you know, contract into I am just this, or I am just this, is just not the truth of who we are. And when we start to tap into that vast possibility of who we can become, and who we have been in the past, and all these, you know, I mean, it's just, it's amazing. And it starts to, you know, open us up and allow us to be more flexible, and allow us to be more relaxed with our situation and with who we are, because any one moment certainly doesn't define us. And, you know, a few months and, you know, in our homes, and, you know, in a changing situation and dealing with uncertainty is only, you know, a very, very small part. of who we are and what our lives are. So mindfulness can really help with that. So today what I wanted to talk about is is death and impermanence. So I wasn't sure at first about bringing this up. Now, death, talking about death uh, in um, in Buddhist, as part of our Buddhist training, if you were coming to a regular introduction to Buddhism course here at Tushita, we would spend, about, I think, at least an hour and a half, and then you'd do a meditation on it, and then you would discuss it. So you'd spend a good, portion of the day thinking about your own death. And yet here in our situation now, death is becoming much more immediate and much more real for many of us, especially if you're starting to be aware of this particular disease. Often they compare it to flu and colds, and it's actually, they're showing that it's much more deadly than the flu. And so death is much more in our face. And actually in Buddhism, we try to do that. We try to meditate on that, to bring death much closer to us, not to create fear, because that's not the purpose of it, but to help us recognize that we want to use our lives well. We want to use the time that we do have, this precious life that we have, as effectively and as positively as possible. And so recognizing that we are going to die actually creates in us a certain amount of urgency, a certain amount of need to use our time well, use our time effectively. Because if we, it's like, if we have let's say we have a bag of rice, okay, and we have our families to feed, and if we have a whole storage facility of like bags and bags of rice, if we let a few grains fall on the ground, or we throw away a few grains, it doesn't really, we don't worry about it too much. But if we only have like one bag of rice, and that has to last for a certain amount of time, then we're going to treat each grain of rice much more preciously. We're going to use it well. We're going to not waste it. We're going to use it effectively. And so if we can start to see that our lives are like this, that we only have a certain amount of time that we're going to be alive. So then what it does is make more of our moments more precious and more important. And so our tendency to just waste our time becomes less, if we think about the fact that we don't know how much we have, and we want to use it to make our lives meaningful, to really, and depending on what you think about what comes after death, to actually use our time with people. We don't know when we're going to lose people. So then being present with them when we're actually with them, and really valuing our time with them, is much more, it becomes more meaningful. So I have a relative, my father, he's actually my stepfather, but he's been my father actually longer than I knew my biological father. And he's 100 years old. He turned 100 this year. And so my time with him, I go and stay with them for about a month out of the year. And each time now I say goodbye, I I know that it could be the last, that I might not see him again. And so it's not that I don't get weepy and upset, and oh, I'm gonna lose him, and oh, it's so horrible. I actually, and he doesn't either. It's more like we become much more heartfelt. My connection to him is so much stronger now in these last days of our lives, of his life. it becomes like a really, powerful and meaningful and deep. I feel like I have this really deep connection with him, because I know that I will, likely lose him in a short amount of time. And so bringing, death into our lives much more. And I don't think we do this in our normal lives. We don't typically do this. We tend to, we don't see people die very often unless we're in the medical field that deals with dying people. People don't typically, except in, in more traditional homes, people don't die at home. They tend to die in hospitals or in, homes for the aging. We have a lot more separation, and death is much more isolated. And the death that we do see, like on television, is actually not very real. If you watch, action films where people die, or even dramas where people die, we know and we remind ourselves, well, this isn't really happening. These people, they're actors. They aren't really dying, and so we have this sense of, even though we see death a lot on television, possibly, we think it's not as real as actually it is. And so this death contemplation that I want to talk about is how we bring death more present for ourselves. So this understanding that death is definite, that we are going to die. Okay. We know intellectually, if you ask anyone if they're going to die, they do know intellectually they're going to die. But but we don't remember it. We tend to kind of push it away, to not really see it very much. And so if you think about it, if you spend some time thinking about it, uh, the fact that in about 120 years, and that's giving us lots of time, right? The babies that are being born, even the babies that are being born, that every single human being, all of these billions of people that exist on the earth right now, they will all be dead, right? And there will be completely new human beings. I mean, every single person that exists right now on the earth will be gone, okay? And that includes us, right? We fit in there, okay? So definitely it's going to end at some point, okay? And even very famous people die, even very wealthy people die, even very beautiful people die, very poor people, everybody, absolutely everybody dies. And we aren't exempt from that, right? So when we start to look at this fact of, my own death is going to happen at some point, and we can remind ourselves of this whenever we hear about other people dying, whenever we see like animals that are dead, or we see like on television or in news stories, that someone has died, we can remind ourselves that will be me. There will come a time when I die. Or we can think about, what will the world be like when we're gone? Okay, how long will people actually, their lives will go on? I think about my nieces and nephews, and how their lives will go on. And I think about the people who have passed away in my life, and that I don't really think about them so much anymore, even though they were very important to me when they were present. Our memories fade, and we do go out of existence. And so this is just this is part of life. But bringing it more into immediacy is really helpful to us. Okay. And then the second one, that our time of death is uncertain. We don't really know when we're going to die, which means that these moments become even more precious and more important. And the purpose is not to put pressure on you, okay? Sometimes it can feel like, oh no, now what am I doing? What am I doing? It's more just to start to tip the scales a little bit, maybe more bringing it more into balance, of, instead of thinking that we have oodles and oodles of time to waste, and to just kind of bring it more like, okay, let's get a little bit more serious about what we want to do with our life. How do I want to make my life meaningful? How do I want to work on my mind? How do I want to, what kind of relationships do I want to have? Do I really want to reject the people in my life because they did some really small thing that made me angry? And now I'm saying, oh no, you can't be in my life anymore because I don't like what you said or what you did. That really won't matter in, 5 years, but we create these situations in our lives, and it's very sad. We reject the people that we love out of anger, thinking that that's the solution. And yet, if we had this awareness that we're all going to die anyway, how important would those things be? How really important is, that they took your boyfriend away or something like that? At the time it feels so powerful, but if we look at it in perspective, we start to see that, those acts of retaliation and rejection, they don't make us feel good, and they are really are not that important when we start to look more closely at them. So time of death is uncertain. We don't know when we're going to be separated from those people. So treating this time as so precious. And then from a Buddhist point of view, we want to really prepare for the moment of our death. We want to get ready for when we're going to die, because that is such a powerful moment in terms of our next life, in terms of our future life. Okay, so the spiritual practice then becomes the best way for us to prepare for our moment of death. How we live our lives actually has a huge impact on how we die. So if we have a calm, peaceful, positive, happy mind, then when we get ready to die, those fears of the unknown, fears of the uncertainty that happen at the time of death, we're more ready and able to deal with them, to cope with them. And in Buddhism, we want to create a situation in which our moment of death is as peaceful as possible, so that we can deal with the death process very well. Because when we go through the death process, it's a very powerful moment for our spiritual development. Our minds become more and more subtle, more and more refined, and those obscurations and that ignorance and that gross distraction, it actually it dissolves, it flows away, and it dissolves into the moments of our mind that are very clear. They actually call it a clear light moment of the mind. And if we can recognize that moment and use that mind, we can actually um, uh, uh, let's see, use it to develop our wisdom and our realizations of the nature of reality, which we have to talk about further when we get further. But for those of you who have studied some Tibetan Buddhism, getting ready for our time of death can be very, very powerful. And when we die peacefully, then the chances of us having a positive next rebirth, like being born a human again, being born into a situation where we have all the supports to, for our families to help us, be, have a calm mind, be able to be educated like we have been this life, to have very positive circumstances to continue our spiritual growth are greater. Okay, if we die with a very virtuous kind of positive mind, not hating and angry and self-doubt, if we can think about resolve our regrets, do lots of forgiveness for ourselves and others, then we're more ready to have a positive future life. Okay, so working with our death. So death is an example of impermanence. So let's talk a little bit about impermanence. Okay. All right. So impermanence. So I want to get clear on some terms here, because we use the word impermanence a little bit differently in Buddhism than we do in regular language. Okay, so if you think about the definition of temporary, so for example, this cup, okay, that I have right here, this cup is temporary in the sense that someday it's going to break into very little pieces, okay, right? Maybe first it'll break into bigger pieces and then they'll throw it away and then it'll get, chewed up into smaller pieces slowly, okay? So this cup is considered temporary, okay? It is not eternal. So we consider the opposite of temporary is eternal, meaning lasting forever. Okay, so oftentimes we equate temporary with impermanent, right? The usual normal language way of thinking definition of impermanent is just like I've been talking about as temporary. Okay, now when we talk of impermanence in Buddhism, we're actually talking about change. Okay, something that changes is impermanent. Okay, now the term permanent we often equate with eternal. Okay, we think of something that is permanent, that is going to last forever. Okay, and in Buddhism, when we talk about permanence, we talk about something that is unchanging. Okay, and very, very few things exist that are permanent, that do not change. Okay, very few things. An example of it is space. Space doesn't change. Okay, the absence of something doesn't change. Okay, so these permanent is a kind of a difficult concept in Buddhism because everything that we experience is impermanent. Okay, so our thoughts, our feelings, everything in our world, everything that is the result of causes and conditions changes. Okay, and so it is impermanent. So in this context, impermanent means that it never stays the same as one thing for any amount of time. Okay, so for example, this cup is constantly changing. Okay, now it doesn't appear to be changing to my senses, right? When I look at this cup, I cannot see the fact that it is constantly changing. I have to go deeper, like with a, an electron microscope, to see the fact that, it's losing electrons, it's interacting with the air and the water molecules in the environment. It is slowly, slowly falling apart. Okay, so that is an example of subtle impermanence. Now, I can know that it is constantly changing because I can see gross impermanence. Okay, so an example of gross impermanence, of obvious impermanence, is when I look at a picture. Let's say I have a picture of me when I'm 5 years old. Okay, and I may not necessarily remember what I looked like, but my mom can tell me, oh yeah, that was you when you were 5 years old. I know I have a picture of myself when I was wearing these goofy clothes. I was like 5 years old and I had this funny blouse on, right? And I remember that blouse, right? So I know it was definitely me, okay, in this picture. But then I look in the mirror and I see I look completely different, right? This picture of me, and now that I am, I'm not 5 years old anymore, right? I'm in my 50s. Okay. So so definitely I have changed now. So that's an example of gross impermanence. Now, with my reasoning, I can know that I am changing moment to moment because when did those changes happen? When did I go from being this 5-year-old body to being in my 50s? Okay, when did that actually happen? Okay, now it didn't happen every January 1st, right? It didn't happen every January 1st. I look completely different. I aged for a year, right? It didn't happen on my birthday, right? It doesn't happen every morning when I wake up, right? I can't see those changes. Those changes don't happen in, in a set amount of time. So when do they happen? Well, they're happening all the time. They're happening moment to moment. Okay. And when I talk about moment, I'm talking about the very smallest instant of time that we can imagine. Okay. So, and right now I think in science, they call it a nanosecond, but even a nanosecond can be divided into smaller amounts of time. Okay. So when we're talking about a subtle impermanence, we're actually talking about something that is more like a wave or a process rather than actually moments of time. So let's try this. Let's talk a little bit more about subtle impermanence. All right, see if I can do this. Okay, so let's say that from here to here is an instant in time. Okay, so that's an instant in time. So what we can talk about in this instant of time, we can call it a nanosecond. We can divide it, and we can say that the beginning of this instant, we can divide it into two, right? We can talk about the beginning of the instant of time, and we can talk about the end of the moment in time, right? So we can divide one moment in time into two parts, the beginning of the moment and the end of the moment, right? You with me so far? You can nod, I can see you. Yeah? Okay, good. All right. Now, we can divide also the end of the instant of time even further, can't we? We can divide it into the beginning of the end and the end of the end. Okay? So we've divided time even more. All right? And then we can take the end of the end and we can divide it again, can't we? We can divide it into the beginning of the end and the end of the end of the end. Okay, and then we can even do it again, and we can take the end of the end of the end, and we can divide it into the beginning of the end of the end of the end and the end of the end of the end of the end, right? And we can do this infinitely. Okay, so infinitely means that on a practical level that time disappears. Okay, so there is never actually a moment in which anything exists as a single thing. Okay, so this cup that is constantly changing, when does it actually exist or abide as a cup? Okay, now practically it's a cup now because my mind sees it that way, right? My senses experience it that way. But when I start to analyze more deeply into the actual existence of the cup in time, the cup starts to disappear. Okay, it's still here, but it is also at the same time it is not there. Okay, because it's never existing as a cup for any amount of time. Now, because our minds are so dualistic, because we either have to have it this way or this way, it's very hard to conceive of the way the cup actually exists as somehow here and not here at the same time. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to start to bring us closer to the side where the cup doesn't actually exist as concretely, as absolutely as we believe it does. Okay, and when we do that, things start to shimmer a little bit and they start to break up a little bit, and so they don't seem so absolute and so real and so concrete and so inflexible. Okay, when we can start to loosen our perceptions a little bit of things, then our beliefs about them don't become so absolute. Okay, we become more comfortable with the fact that they're going to go away. Okay, like I know, no matter how much I like this cup, that it's not going to be there all the time for me. And even really more important things to me, like my amazing stepfather, that I love so deeply. I also know that he's not going to be there forever. And that's okay, because that's how everything is. And the more that I can get used to that, the more that I can bring that into my awareness, that I can get comfortable with that, the less I'm going to cling on to things, that I'm going to grasp at things, that I'm going to grasp at the situation. You know, like I'm always going to have this job, or I'm always going to have this level of income, or I'm always going to have this person in my life. And it's not that I say they aren't important, right? I'm seeing the reality more clearly, that they're constantly changing. I am constantly changing. We come together, we go apart. And we've all been dealing with this all through our lives, because that's the way things are. And it's only our perceptions that try to make things stick and stay the same. And the more we can get comfortable with their change, with their impermanence, the more happy we are with it, you know, and we can learn to celebrate it, and we can learn to see it and value it and honor it. And then our perceptions, our way of seeing reality, become more in line with how reality actually is. And so then it doesn't create so much suffering for ourselves. Okay, so that's my presentation, and now we'll do some questions, clarify it a little bit, and then we'll do some meditation on impermanence. So if you have questions, go ahead and type them in.
Okay, please type in your questions. All right, we have one about impermanence from Bidhi. I'm gonna first unmute Bidhi so she can ask a question. Yeah.
Okay, can I?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, I'm seeing you again. I'm lucky.
Yeah.
Well, my question again is related to this topic that we discussed about impermanence today. As you said in the previous classes as well, and today as well, that when we talk about, when we learn about impermanence, we always somehow have to think that the things are going to end or diminish or decrease. So do I take it as that I always have to take it a bit on a negative side? Like if I have cheesecake, for example, I already need to think that, okay, this cheesecake is going to end. So won't it lose the essence, as in I would not be able to enjoy it as much as I could because I know that it's going to end. There is already a negative thinking in my mind.
Actually, what happens is that when you know things are going to end, you become more present with their actual, instead of worrying about trying to keep them the same, instead of going to the future of trying to arrange how you're going to always have cheesecake, or how you're going to get the next cheesecake, right? Which is what we usually do when we when we hold on tight to experiences and people. We start plotting and planning how we're going to keep them making us happy, right? Instead of actually enjoying them in the moment. So what happens is when we recognize they're going to go, we're more focused on their value now, being present with them now. So no, it doesn't work that way. Actually, our minds are more occupied in a negative way when we try to hold on to them with the fear of losing them, than they are when we already accept that it's going to change. We already accept that. We're much more relaxed about enjoying them in the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now I am unmuting Rashana, so you can now ask your question or not.
Okay, thank you. Hi, so my question was to do with subtle impermanence. I think with this whole coronavirus, I am really fixating on accepting death. And because of that, I'm like thinking about everybody I've hurt. And I think recently it's my ex-partner that I'm thinking about. And I'm almost like thinking about how to like fix it in the sense that I want to be forgiven. And he's not in a space to do that because he's taking time to process my, the pain I've caused. But I'm just like, we're all going to die. So can you just forgive me already and can we move on? I feel that sense of entitlement almost. I'm just like, I don't know if I have the virus. I don't know if you have it. Nobody knows. So, and I think that's like I'm getting nightmares about it and I'm constantly fixating. And that's when you spoke about subtle impermanence. So logically, I know that everything's going to change and we're all going to die and I'm okay to die. But it's just that, like, how do you really cultivate this subtle impermanence then?
Okay. Well, I guess it sounds more like your question is about forgiveness, and you can't make people do anything, right? But you can work on forgiving yourself. And one of the things that they really emphasize when you're preparing for your own death is that you release regrets and you forgive yourself. And so finding a way to let go of those things that you've done, coming to more understanding of, what were the other causes and conditions that went into that situation for you. So the other aspect of impermanence is that things come into being not through one particular, one specific cause. So the situations that happen where we hurt people, it's not just this single self, there's no such thing for one of a single self that somehow causes hurt to others, right? There are a self is many things, right? It's the conditions that you were in. It's your past hurt history in relationships. It's his relationship with others. It's our cultural situation. It's where we are in our lives. What is our maturity level? What is our experience? How do we know? I mean, there's so many different things that come into any act that we do, of harming someone else, that to then say, okay, I am to blame. First of all, we have to find that I that is somehow to blame. And if we think about it in terms of impermanence, we're constantly changing, right? I am a completely different than the person who hurt my mom when I was a teenager, right? I'm a completely different person now. My continuums are connected, right? But this idea of a concrete self that takes on all the blame for everything that I've ever done is an illusion. It's something that I have layered on my mind to say, okay, this is myself. And we start to equate ourselves with all these negative actions that we've ever done, when in fact we've done lots of positive actions too. And your relationship probably with your ex-boyfriend, probably there were many wonderful, amazing moments that you had as well. And you probably brought lots of joy to his life as well. So we can start to look at, open up things, like I keep saying, open up, look at things from many different perspectives. Every situation has positives and negatives. And then as you forgive yourself, as you start to see how you were kind to him, how now you want to be kind again, how it isn't as important, then as you start to let go of it, he will also feel that, right? He may hold on tight and stuff, but your energy can influence the fact, and your interactions with him can start to say, I'm letting go of that now. I'm letting go of that situation. I can rebuild my friendship with you. It doesn't necessarily have to go back to being, boyfriend, girlfriend, but I can have a positive future with you if we still want to stay connected. And even in my own mind, I can have a positive. I can wish you well in the future. I can want you to be happy in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, moving on, we go to a question from Christy, and actually a couple of people were, I think, asking a similar question.
Okay, good. Christy?
Thank you first for the teachings. And hopefully I do right by others' questions as well. My question was just about if you could speak a little bit to what happens if we don't have that presence or peacefulness in death, or if others don't. For example, if there's like the terror of a car accident, or a lot of pain, or even perhaps like lack of awareness because of being on painkillers or something like that.
Yeah. Well, two things come to mind. One is that death is a process. It's never, it can be sudden in the sense of the bodily functions shut down very quickly, but the process of the consciousness leaving the body is usually much slower. Okay, so as the consciousness leaves the body, so even if we can't recognize that very subtle mind as it emerges in the in the consciousness, the moment still happens for us. Okay, it still happens. So one thing, like when those we don't have the ability to recognize those moments, actually other people can help with that process through their those that we have a connection with, in particular a karmic connection with, that if we have positive thoughts for others, if we have encouragement, if we say kind things, if we think about how they were amazing people in their lives, if we want have well wishes for their future lives, then we can actually we can't be the cause, but we can be the positive conditions for those people to have a positive experience after the pain is done, and after as the consciousness starts to leave the body. Okay, so so we can be a positive influence for them. What we don't want to do is grasp on. If someone has passed away, we don't want to focus on how we wish they were still here, how we can be, acknowledge that we miss them, of course, because feeling sad about them being gone is a natural response. But we can also practice letting them go into whatever positive experience is next for them. And that's very important for the people who are dying, is that we practice not only how much we love them and want them to be happy, but we also want them to have, to let them go in a positive way. And that's a big Buddhist message for us who are, letting others go. Okay, great. Maybe one more question and then we'll go to meditation.
Okay, I'm going to unmute Geraldine. You can ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for everything. So, bit the same with like everything that's going on at the moment with this virus. I think the fear of dying and the fear of losing our loved ones is very strong. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to know what are the antidotes in terms like of Buddhist practice?
Antidotes to what? To the fear?
To the fear, yes. To the fear of dying, losing loved ones, yes.
Okay. So for our own death, we can get used to the idea. Okay. So because and this is what, I was talking about in the lecture, is we can get used to the idea that we're going to die. Okay. So another Buddhist meditation, the contemplation that I outlined in the PowerPoint, of that we're definitely going to die, we don't know what is going to happen, and spiritual practice can help us at the time of death. Another meditation that sometimes we can do is imagining our own death. So imagining a time when we got sick, when we started to recognize the symptoms, started having more difficulty, starting, letting our loved ones know that we were going, the imagining being in bed, not being able to get up, imagining, our consciousness slowly leaving our bodies, these kinds of things, just actually going through the process of dying in our minds through visualization. And I was brought up to really reject thinking about my own death, that it was considered, morbid and somehow not an okay thing to do, right? And that somehow it's gonna bring it sooner or something, and we shouldn't do it. We should just wait until it happens and then deal with it. And in Buddhist circles, we actually are encouraged to make it more real for ourselves. And I don't think it's not, because we know that we're imagining something that's going to happen. We aren't making it happen for ourselves, we aren't wishing to die. We're just being honest and we're being realistic. And the other, you can do the same thing with people that you care about, with people that you love, because recognizing that they are going to die someday, that actually helps decrease our grasping at them, of trying to keep them, and hold on to them, because that's the pain, is that when we hold on and then we lose them, that's much worse than recognizing, I love you, I care about you, I want you to be happy, I feel so close to you, and at the same time, I know you're not always going to be with me, and I'll be sad when you go, but I also know it's true. It's very hard. I know it's very hard. And I don't want to, demean it in any way, but I did this. One of my best friends in the whole world was actually my dog. So I had a dog for about 16 years, and he was 17 when he passed away. And the year before he died, he was a corgi mix. Okay, so he was long and he had blonde hair and a big nose and brown eyes. He was beautiful. His name was Fabio, and he lost the use of his legs about a year before he actually died. And I thought that this was it, that he was going to die. I was going to lose him. And I was overwhelmed with the thought of losing him, because he was so important to me. And it was in a place in my mind, in my life, when it was I was going through a difficult time. So the thought of losing him, at that time, just really struck me as how it was going to be so hard emotionally. And so then he actually got some medicine and he was okay, and then his decline was much slower after that. But I started actually imagining what I would do once he was gone, so I imagined what kind of a funeral I would have for him. I imagined what my life would be like, after he was gone. And I imagined, even missing him and being sad about him being gone. And so that when the time actually came for him to die, I was much better able to handle it. It was much easier. I was still sad, but it was almost, a joyous event. I had friends who came and helped me. We did practices for him, and it was actually a very positive experience of death for me, as a result of the work that I did before he died. So that's just an example of how I worked through it. Just getting used to the idea that it's going to happen, and that it's okay. It's a natural, just like being born, dying. There, it's part of life, and we're gonna all experience it, even though it's sad. Okay. Thank you
very much. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let's do some meditation.
Okay, just as a heads up, probably my microphone will catch more of the storm than Venerable Drolma's microphone. So if you can hear the roaring thunder and the rain, I'm sorry, I'm going to try to speak a little bit louder than usual, but please bear with me. And also we might experience power outage at any point because the storm is pretty intense. So let's start by going back into a comfortable position, going back to a posture that where you can feel grounded and relaxed, and especially allowing your back to be loosely upright. And allowing the bell to bring you into the space of the body first. Bringing the awareness down to the area of contact between your body and whatever surface you're sitting on. Noticing this physical sensation, becoming grounded and stable. Connecting with the earth element within the body, which symbolizes solidity. And then relaxing, bringing the body back to its natural state, a state of balance, relaxation, calmness. Giving yourself the luxury of 3 deep breaths, filling the lungs to their full capacity as you breathe in, and gently letting go, releasing the breath. Breathing in fully and letting go. Breathing in peace and calmness. Breathing out worries and concerns. And for a moment, simply let go of all the doing activity of the mind and just experience this moment of calmness. There's absolutely nothing that you need to worry about, nowhere else you need to be. So simply stay with the body resting in its natural state, just observing, not much to do. And so as the body and the mind settle down, they go into a state which is conducive for meditation. This is a good basis, a good foundation to start the meditation. And so while we're observing the body, we can now become aware of any particular physical sensation, whatever appears more obviously to your mind, whatever you can feel in your body, any physical sensation such as temperature, pressure, comfort, discomfort, pain, tingling, itchiness, whatever it is, take a moment to observe this physical sensation. But this time we also investigate and analyze. Notice if this sensation is changing or if it stays the same moment to moment. And having observed this physical sensation for a minute now, perhaps you did notice some change, but maybe not. Maybe it seems like this sensation is not changing. And yet we can use our reasoning to actually investigate further. If this sensation didn't change, then you would actually experience it all the time. It would be there in the same spot, the same intensity for the rest of your life. When you wake up tomorrow, that same sensation would be there. Is that really possible? Is that really the case? And we can even go deeper into this reasoning and knowing that tactile sensations arise from all of the biochemical reactions that are happening in the body right now. Hundreds of thousands of them happening every single second. Because our bodies are composed of millions, billions, trillions of cells. Each of these cells is constantly moving, processing, dividing, coming into being, disintegrating. Every single part of our body is in constant movement, in constant activity. Try to see if you can connect with this constant flux of the body and every single part of it. Think of how your hair is growing right now. Your nails are growing right now. Several million of skin cells are dying while several other million are being born. And these cells within the body are in turn made out of molecules. Those molecules are made out of atoms. The atoms possess subatomic particles. And in this level, nothing stays still for even a split second. There is no instant in which these particles are not moving around, coming in and out of existence, rearranging themselves. Every single atom in your body interacting with one another, reacting to the temperature, to other atoms around it, to the forces that influence the systems. There is not a millisecond in which every single part of your body is not changing. Try to see if you can become aware of this. If you can be present with this constant state of flux. And the same that applies to the atoms in our bodies applies to the atoms of everything else. The walls on your room, the ceiling, the floor, the windows, the surface you're sitting on. Everything seems so static, so unchanging. And yet we know that those things are also made out of atoms. Those things are definitely changing as well. Even though that change may not be obvious to us, it is happening. All the roads, the cars, the trees, the mountains, the clouds, the buildings, other people. Everything that comes about from causes and conditions is in the nature of change, of impermanence. Try to accept this fact. Let that awareness sink in. Let it become part of your experience, not just intellectual, but heartfelt. And this change in nature doesn't only apply to physical phenomena, but also to mental things. Take a moment to bring your attention to your current state of mind, your thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And also investigate if these thoughts, these feelings change from moment to moment. Once again, bring in the reasoning that if they didn't, then they would be present constantly without changing. But our thoughts do change, don't they? So do our feelings. And even though impermanence could perhaps be challenging from some perspective, we can actually bring more focus to the positive side of impermanence. The fact that everything changes is actually a realm of infinite possibilities, especially considering the fact that we can change our own minds. We are not stuck with our negative emotions. We are not stuck with our bad habits. We are not stuck with the patterns that we have right now. And we can actually make a conscious decision, set a strong intention to change our mind for the better. Change is possible. It is a part of nature. And also keeping an awareness of impermanence, we can accept when things change in a way that we won't necessarily want. At that point, we simply accept that this is the way things are. And we can also soften our clinging to things as if they were permanent and everlasting. And as this awareness sinks deeper into your heart, when difficult situations arise, you can simply bring up the thought, let it go, this too shall pass. And that can be applied to everything. Just relaxing and letting go. Slowly and gently coming out of the meditation, becoming aware of your body, your surroundings. And we now go into the aspect of dedication. So, as usual, bring in an awareness of those who are struggling with difficulties, especially in this time, people that we may know that are going through a difficult moment, and simply opening up our hearts to share this good energy, this positive potential that we've generated with others as well, wishing them well. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain a notion of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored and finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be free. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain, to dispel the miseries of the world. May it be so. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Felipe. If I could make a request, if you have the means and you found these classes helpful, if you can donate. The donation, the way to do it, the information is in the email that you received when you registered, but you are not obligated in any way to offer anything. We offer these classes freely, and we want you to come and we want you to be here no matter if you can donate or not, but if you can, please do. And so we're going to take 2 days off. For some of you, that might be, we'll start again on Sunday, or for us, it's Monday morning. But we'll see you back next week. Please come back. Okay? Thank you.
Have a nice weekend, everyone. Take care.
Yes.
Stay safe, be well, and be happy. Bye.